Hello, everyone, and welcome to another ASUG Partner Webcast. My name is Maureen McInerney, Partner Marketing Specialist here at ASUG, and I'll be your moderator for this event. I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to join us today for this presentation. Today's webcast is being recorded. The link to the recording and the accompanied slides will be posted to the ASUG website calendar of events, and all registrants from today will receive a follow-up email with the link to those materials once the webcast has concluded. For the best viewing experience, we recommend using a wired internet connection and closing any programs or browser sessions running in the background. The webcast is streamed through your computer, so there is no dial-in number. You can find additional answers to some common technical issues located in the Help Engagement tool at the bottom of your screen. I'd like to remind our audience members that you can submit your questions at any time during the presentation by using the Q&A widget on your console. Today's webcast is SAP on Google Cloud in lightning speed, lessons learned from a recent customer deployment, sponsored by Google Cloud. Our speakers today are Eddie Sardilli, Google Cloud's lead for Global SAP Alliances, and Nick Militich, Senior Solutions Engineer from Managecore. And with that, I'll hand it over to Eddie to get us started today.
Thank you very much. And again, welcome everybody. Really thank you for making the time to join our webcast today. And thank you to ASUG for hosting us. Thank you to Managecore, our esteemed partner and experts in the field to help with customers moving their SAP workloads to Google Cloud. And then, of course, our SAP partnership and alliances and our co-innovation partner that really is helping us automate and modernize SAP on cloud. So a brief agenda of what we're going to talk about today, introduction of Google Cloud and Managecore, as you've just heard. Why run SAP workloads on Google Cloud? I'll get into a little bit of the value propositions, very high level, but there's much more information on cloud.google.com/SAP, where you can go into much more detail. And, of course, reach out to our partners and ourselves for any more information. And then Nick will take us through some of the strategies to accelerate your GCP migration projects and the successes and lessons learned from one of our customers, FFF Enterprises. And then we'll break out into Q&A. So I'm going to get right into it just for the sake of time and just talk to you a little bit about what our customers are telling us and what makes us different in the hyperscaler market. Some of these topics are top of mind for many CIOs and many vice presidents of infrastructure, and of course our SAP leads out there. Best-in-class security, right? Moving IP from your data centers or from other data centers into Google Cloud. And what we've done for 20 years to really deal with cybersecurity threats and to really deal with access control and data custodian and just the way we do security in general, right? We have done this across all our properties at Alphabet, and so it's great if you can come over and learn about how we do it and how we bring that security level that no one else can to protect your systems and data and your users. We've embraced hybrid and multi-cloud. We like to talk about it as smart cloud. But not all your systems are going to run in one cloud, right? Customers are using many different clouds. They're also still running some systems in their own data centers potentially, right? So the idea here is how do we help you just leverage your environment, your entire landscape, and try to get as much into cloud and benefits from the agility and flexibility that cloud provides at Google. We talk about fully managed and no operations, right? Like this is things like BigQuery and Kubernetes containerization and just everything across what we do from an elasticity and scalability perspective. One of the examples I always use for this topic is our artificial intelligence and machine learning, and of course our BigQuery platform. We've embedded AI and ML in pretty much every project at Alphabet. We have over 100,000 developers around the world that use our platform for artificial intelligence and machine learning. And of course, we have some of the most extraordinary cloud functions and APIs to really help augment and bring innovation in and around the SAP ecosystem. Matter of fact, SAP does all their worldwide development on GCP for S/4HANA and are integrating a lot of capabilities into their cloud platform and Leonardo offering. And then, of course, one thing that's top of mind for many leaders and our customers is bringing the rest of Google and the best of Google to your enterprise, right? We have a culture of innovation here. We've done so many great things, and we continue to solve the world's most complex problems. And it's truly about, leveraging some of those learnings and bringing some of that culture and change management to all this new flexibility and agility and reduction in total cost of ownership that we bring to the table. And so how can you leverage some of those smarts and some of those best practices in your world today? So we like to talk to everyone about this approach because it's super important, right? Not everyone has delved into cloud early, right? Some people are still getting into cloud as we speak. And there's really a crawl, walk, run, right? It's all about running on cloud, then running great on cloud, and then potentially running cloud optimized or running cloud native eventually. So some people have, gone in full-fledged and ported their landscape over and migrated their landscape. We've had customers that have migrated over 400 applications in under 12 months. There's some webinars about those examples on our website. But ideally here, it's about seamlessly migrating your SAP to GCP and gaining some of that reliability, security, and scalability that you're looking for. We're always on the latest and greatest hardware and compute-optimized infrastructure. We actually build our own hardware. We have our own network. And so you get to take advantage of things that we have built from 20 years and counting and bring that over to your SAP workloads. And then finally, we move on to the next step, which is, accelerate and modernize, automate as much as possible, and really have the agility to spin HANA systems up and down. It's truly a pay-as-you-go scenario. It offers you tremendous flexibility. You're not locked into any hardware or configurations. It's really about compute, and it's like a utility bill. You pay for what you use, right? And then finally, when you get on cloud and you're running great on cloud and you've modernized, now it's about, in parallel, innovating and differentiating your offerings to your customers and your partners and really taking advantage of advanced analytics, machine learning, and really building an API-driven capability and moving the operations above the value line, not worrying about how your SAP is running, how its reliability and security is and the infrastructure, but more about building business capability on top of SAP and really connecting to those systems of record, be it SAP or other applications, through APIs. And so finally, I'll talk a little bit about some differentiators. You'll see some bullets here across the different tenants, but we get into a lot more detail here with our partners like Managecore that you'll hear from Nick now, and also there's workshops that we deliver in front of customers jointly to help you understand the value of each and every one of these capabilities and differentiators, right? So more importantly, around reliability, right? We have simplified and provided an SAP environment with the best HA and DR capabilities. Within our regions, we have multiple zones that provide you HA in production, and then you have multiple regions to provide you DR capabilities, all on a single fiber virtual private cloud that's, a premium network. You're not out there on ISP, and obviously you get low latency because of that. And there's other things like live migration, where you can reduce downtime for any maintenance planned every quarter to, patch infrastructure or hypervisor or anything that you're doing on the maintenance level for hardware. That goes away with Google Cloud. And you can tell we do that. You have no disruption in Gmail, YouTube, Maps, right? That's a capability we built into our framework a very long time ago, and it applies to SAP and other application workloads as well. Agility, I talked a little bit about our pricing and pay-as-you-go. It's consumption-based billing. We have strong backup and recovery solutions for those of you who use Commvault, Actifio, and others like up-and-comers like Rubrik. Those capabilities extend into the cloud. We've built a true ecosystem of offerings across all the different partners and technologies that are out there, and you get to take advantage of all of that in the Google Cloud ecosystem. And it's complete virtualized infrastructure, right? This is important. We have started with 4 terabyte VMs for HANA in September of last year. Our customer base has grown dramatically, and we have some of the largest SAP logos on Google Cloud. And we've already released 6 and 12 terabyte VMs. We're the only cloud provider that offers 4 nines availability. So that gives you the best uptime in the industry. And also we're coming out with 24 terabytes first half of next year. And this is complete virtualized. There's no bare metal. There's no lock into configuration. You can scale out, scale up the way you want. Finally, it's all about the value, right? It's all about innovating. It's all about bringing that automation like RPA and machine learning and AI to the business processes that you have. And of course, we have a true unique partnership with SAP where we're co-innovating and continuing to improve the offerings that we bring to our customers. An example of that is BigQuery integration to HANA, embedding technologies in SAP Cloud Platform. And then last but not least, Google runs SAP as well. So we have a team here that can talk to customers as well about how we run SAP and how we've automated a lot of the capabilities. So I'm going to hand it over to Nick to get into other specifics and more detail.
Great. Thanks, Eddie. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nick Militich, and before we get started into the deep dive of a case study and how to run SAP and GCP, a little bit of background on Managecore. So Managecore, we're a certified SAP and Google Cloud partner and a leading provider of basis technical managed services. So utilizing our skilled engineers and industry-leading monitor and cloud automation tools, we're able to provide intelligent solutions that are fully transparent to our customers. And we're also recognized as a leader in SAP HANA transformations and have completed one of the very first production S4 HANA migrations to the Google Cloud. At Managecore, we're here to simplify the management of your Google Cloud infrastructure. So my team of Google certified engineers guarantees customers' SAP environments are running smooth once live in GCP. And before go live, we ensure your systems are properly configured and help set up the network, security, HA, and DR in the Google Cloud for your entire SAP landscape. Then through our SAP technical support, we then continue to monitor your environment for its ongoing health. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the strategies to accelerate your GCP migration project. So utilizing Managecore's proven methodology, we're able to accelerate deployments and guarantee success of your GCP projects. We start with assessment of your environment, and this is critical to any successful project, and I'll get into the details in a little bit here. However, this is where we help design and architect how to migrate either your on-premise environment or your current hosted environment to GCP. And this will set the stage for how we're going to transfer the data, what type of environments we're going to spin up in GCP, including networking and HA and DR. We're going to then come up with a game plan for you and start with a sandbox environment to make sure that the migration is smooth and work out all the kinks, and work through the rest of your environment, such as development, quality, and production. And then as we get into your production phase, we're going to start optimizing your environments. So as Eddie mentioned, one of the great benefits of Google Cloud is that you're not committed to have to use certain servers. So as we deploy your environment, you may find that it runs much faster in Google, and you don't need as many resources. We can optimize your environment to really fine-tune how your corporation utilizes SAP and the GCP cloud. So as I mentioned before, we start with the project plan and really get into the start of the GCP environment first, right? We talk with your network team. We really get a good game plan with your infrastructure team. There are portions of GCP that maybe your teams want to learn and understand how to deploy within GCP. So we work with your teams to make sure that whatever is deployed in the Google Cloud is exactly like you would deploy within your environment, for example. So antivirus, anything that you would have as far as monitoring tools. All of that, we work with you to make sure that as we deploy in Google Cloud, it is equivalent to what your standards are. So now to get into some of the reference documentation that are key to a successful deployment in GCP. There are a few SAP notes and a few Google documents that are essential to a successful deployment. The first and foremost two notes on this list, the SAP on Google Cloud Platform support prerequisites and the SAP applications on Google Cloud Platform supported products in Google VM types. Those are going to be the critical notes, and throughout the project is what you're going to check the most, because those two notes really tell you what you have to deploy in order to be fully supported by SAP and GCP. So those two notes, I'll get into a little more detail here on them. However, they are the critical ones. And then within the GCP documentation, they have a lot of documents regarding deployments of HANA, deployments of other SAP products, and the best practices to deploy them within the Google Cloud. Okay. So as with every type of cloud or every type of hardware, only certain products are generally supported by SAP on those platforms. The note that I mentioned prior, the SAP applications on Google Cloud Platform supported products in Google VM types, that is the note that's going to list everything that you need to know in order to deploy your environment within GCP. It's going to list all the supported combinations, all the supported instance types that you can launch, because as you get into deploying it in GCP, there are certain instance types that are only certified for SAP, and in addition to that, there are only certain instance types that are supported for HANA. So you want to be cognizant of that and make sure that you're picking and choosing the right VMs to deploy. In addition to that, that note gives you the SAPS rating of the VM type in GCP. Now that's a very detailed and important piece of information, because right now, if you're running SAP or if you're new to SAP and want to deploy it in GCP, you have to understand either the quick sizer or your current environment to then be able to port it into the Google Cloud. So you take those SAPS ratings, and it's a rating that SAP provides so that you can convert the horsepower of either your current hardware or what might be required based on a quick sizer to then compare it to an instance within the Google Cloud and make sure that when you move to GCP, that the instance type itself will be able to run the workload that you want it to within that platform. The other key takeaway from this SAP note are the SAP versions. So not every version, not every database, and not every OS platform is supported. However, this note will tell you exactly what can and can be done within GCP. In general, the key takeaway is that ABAP and Java systems on SAP NetWeaver 7.0 or higher are supported. Again, it does give you the SAPS ratings. And then from a database platform, DB2, SQL Server, ASE, MaxDB, and HANA are supported platforms within GCP today. And when it comes to OSs, SUSE, Red Hat, and Windows are supported platforms as well. So as I mentioned before, there's only certain supported instance types. And this screen shows you on the left-hand side the instance types for SAP NetWeaver. So a standard SAP NetWeaver stack, that could be one that runs SQL Server or one that just runs PAS or an application server. And then on the right-hand side, you can see the screenshot, and these are a little outdated. However, they show you all the instance types that are supported for HANA. And you want to keep in mind, too, when you look at this and read the HANA specific ones, there are only certain applications that can run, and there are only certain applications or instance types that can run scale out. So you want to be cognizant of that. And by clicking into one of those instance types on SAP's web page, you can see which are supported for what platforms. So as an example, if you look at the N1 High Mem 64 environment, it's a 416 gig system, and it's supported for OLAP, OLTP, so BW on HANA S4, and it's supported for B1. But however, the N1 Mega Mem 96, for example, which is a 1.4 terabyte environment, is only supported for S4 and BW on HANA, as an example. So you just want to be cognizant of that. Unique to GCP is the fact that you can do custom instance types. So you can actually create a VM to suit your needs. Now, that means that if, for example, you had a custom instance that required 10 vCPUs and 52 gig of RAM instead of the N1 High Mem 8, for example, which gave 8 vCPUs and 52 gig, you could do that based on your workload. You want to read that note that was referenced in the last slide, because that does give you prereqs. There are certain rules you have to follow when doing a custom instance type, but it is supported in the Google Cloud Platform. So now I'm going to get into GCP and its actual products that we'd be using when deploying SAP. This screen that I'm going to go over here kind of gives you a high level of the terminology that Google uses when deploying SAP into GCP. So this is common terminology that you would get familiar with as you're working in the GCP platform. So common GCP terminology would be a GCE or Google Compute Engine. This is your server or your VM. And then persistent disk is like your traditional SAN storage, right? It's block level storage, and it's used for performance and persistence. That's what you put your database on. That's what you put your OS files on. And then we get to cloud storage, which is inexpensive data storage. So that's more object-based. That's where you store flat files. That's where you would possibly store your backups. Is a common area for that to store. It's less expensive than persistent disk and highly redundant. Then we get into regions, which are geographical areas comprised of multiple zones, and a zone is a location within a region. So it's effectively a data center, right? A physical location. So in a region like US Central 1, you'd have that region, and within there you'd have multiple data centers located in that geographical part of the US. And then you get to a VPC, and this is an important concept as well. It's a virtual private cloud. It's like your data center, if you will. It's the networking that you set up to get your environment ready to deploy servers. So it's the subnets, it's the storage, it's the instances. Everything gets deployed within that VPC. So to talk about regions and zones, I wanted to show you this map where it specifies, what currently is available within GCP, and kind of get into the nuances around choosing which zone and region to deploy your environment in. So as you can see from the map, there's multiple locations across the world. There's a lot in the US here, and it's important to understand this concept, right? Because as you deploy, you want to make sure that you pick the right region and effectively the right zone. So when you're choosing a region, you want to choose a region that is close to your location in general, right? Because you'll have the least amount of latency from a network perspective. Same goes for DR. If you want DR, you would pick a region that is geographically dispersed according to your rule set, whether it's you have to be a certain amount of miles away from your existing environment. You want to pick a region that equates to that as well. Keep in mind that regions and zones can have different resources. So you want to make sure that as you're choosing which region and which zone to deploy your environment in, you make sure that those zones have the resources that you're looking for. So as an example, an instance type may be available in US West 1, but not in US Central 1. So therefore, you would have to pick possibly US West 1 and US East 1 to deploy, because US East 1 may have that instance type, whereas US Central 1 may not. And then that could be zonal as well. So especially for these emerging technologies, as they get deployed, they generally get deployed in certain regions and maybe even only certain zones. So as you're deploying this, keep that in mind. Understand what can and can't be done in each zone in each region. And Google has that very well documented. And from there, you can choose exactly where and how you're going to deploy your environment. So now on to networking, technology, and design. So there's really three ways you can connect to GCP: a VPN, a partner interconnect, and a dedicated interconnect. The most common method is to use a cloud VPN. And basically, that's a VPN tunnel. And you configure that between your on-premise network and GCP. And it gives you a traditional, IPsec tunneling and the encryption and everything associated with that to make a stable connection. That is running through the internet, and that's generally the most common internet connection to start with when you're doing an SAP project. Because as we all know, when we talk to carriers, it generally takes up to 90 days to drop a line, and for an MPLS or another dedicated type of connection, and this will get you up and running really fast. And then as you decide whether or not you want to do a different type of connection, you can then turn the cloud VPN into a backup connection should your dedicated connection, like an MPLS type of circuit, drop. Now, unique to Google is the fact that for a cloud VPN, you can actually aggregate them. So if you need more than the 1.5 gig per tunnel that a VPN tunnel gives you in GCP, you can actually combine multiple VPN tunnels and aggregate that bandwidth to transfer data faster. So if you needed 3 gig or 4.5 gig, you would take 2 or 3 tunnels, you'd set them up, and you'd bond them together so that you can get the bandwidth that you require. And you can do that on the fly as well. So let's say even once you're in Google and you needed additional transfer bandwidth because of maybe a year-end job that runs that requires a lot of file transfer, you can add that bandwidth temporarily. The second most common network design is the partner interconnect, and that's basically a connection to Google Cloud using a partner to make that connection, right? So if you had a specific carrier of choice, they may have connectivity directly into Google, and what they would do is they would resell you that Google connectivity. You'd be connected through a dedicated connection, and then that partner would then run that final mile, for example, back to your corporate environment. So it's pretty much a dedicated connection, like an MPLS, if you will, but dedicated to you right into Google. Now that's 100% private, doesn't run over the internet. So because of that, a lot of clients choose to go that route because it's a more stable connection at times than a VPN connection. And then the third method is a dedicated interconnect. Now that would be connecting directly to one of the data centers that Google has a drop in. And if you are fortunate enough to be in one of those data centers, you may be able to get a dedicated interconnect, bypassing the partner altogether and getting right into Google. That is the least common option because a lot of clients don't have other data centers where they're located right where Google is dropped. So partner interconnect is generally the most popular option next to Cloud VPN. So I'm going to talk about reference architecture in GCP and how we start the design process of getting your SAP environment within GCP. So for an SAP HANA environment, the following diagram kind of demonstrates how we would deploy a standard environment into GCP. As you can see, we have a region and a zone, And within there, we have a public and private subnets, same concept as a DMZ and then a private subnet. We would deploy SAP within that private subnet, and then publicly we would have an SAP router or a jump server, and then we would connect to your on-premise environment via an interconnect, as I mentioned before, or a VPN tunnel. And this is a simplified concept. However, it kind of shows you how we would distribute it, how we would start the discussion around it. Again, HA and DR are separate from this. This is just your standard deployment method, and it shows you all the different type of Google products that you would use when deploying it. So if you see here, you have persistent disk with all those mount points, and then you have persistent disk for a backup drive. You take backups to that persistent disk, and then you move it to cloud storage for long-term retention. Now to focus on high availability and disaster recovery, that is also an option within GCP and a recommended design and architecture. Now, the great thing about the Google Cloud is that the network is global. So a lot of what concepts that you would have in a traditional data center are kind of thrown out the window, because within GCP, you're allowed to span multiple zones to do HA. So think of it as in a traditional data center, if you were to do HA, it'd be probably 2 racks of hardware, maybe even different sides of the data center, maybe not, and you would have that environment there doing HA, some type of SUSE clustering of some sort, or Windows clustering, something of that nature. And then DR would be in a different data center. Well, with Google, you have the ability to span multiple physical data centers, aka zones, to do HA because of the back-end network that Google has provided. So I can actually do HA across 2 physical locations. So I can run SUSE clustering or Windows clustering across 2 different physical data centers, again, located in the same region. So maybe US West 1, Oregon, for example. However, it'd be 2 different data centers. And then I would do DR to a different region. So maybe US East 1. And it would be across the country. Now, in the HANA world, you would generally use HANA system replication to perform this as well, and you can do that here. We set up HANA to replicate across zones, and then for DR, we'd set it to replicate, across the country to a different, completely different region. Now to talk a little bit about the backup strategy for a HANA database. So in traditional backup software, if you're on-prem or in a different data center today, you may use third-party products, and they would generally have connectivity back into the HANA database using a technology called backend by SAP. And that backend technology is something that the backup vendor, certifies with SAP. Now, Google is unique in the fact that it is one of the only certified cloud platforms for using backend, meaning it saves you time on backups, time on restores, and dollars on disk when it comes to backup. Now, in a previous slide, your standard methodology is to take backups to persistent disk or SAN today, and then you move that to cloud storage, or in a traditional data center, you move it to tape or to other disk. With GCP, you can actually configure backend to do your backups for you. So you can configure it to bypass that persistent disk and go right to cloud storage, therefore not needing all that extra disk to do 2-hop backup process, and you can actually use backend to configure and maintain backups, which is very unique to GCP and allows for much faster backup, storage, and transfer. Now, when we talk about migrating SAP to GCP, there's really 2 different methods that you can use. One is using standard SAP migration tools, and one is using cloud migration tools. Now, for those of you that have been in the SAP ecosystem for a while, SAP standard migration tools are generally using some sort of some tool or something of that nature, SWPM, to migrate using SAP homogeneous or heterogeneous migration, right? So this is standard methodology that SAP supports. And basically what you're doing is you're exporting the database into a flat file, you're transferring the data over, and then you're importing it on the target environment, right? And now there's data transfer methods that you can use to get your data over, which I'll go into in a little bit here. However, that's your tried and true method from migrating SAP. However, over the past several years, a lot of cloud migration tools have been developed to simplify a process of migrating an environment. Now, depending on your situation will be dependent on the tool set you use or your tool set options. However, these tool sets for the cloud migration tools can significantly increase the speed or decrease the amount of time it takes to get your SAP system into GCP. So it minimizes downtime by basically replicating the system, and each tool set works a little differently, right? You have tool sets that basically take your environment, replicate it over, and then continue to do delta changes up until you're ready to migrate. And you have tool sets that kind of do the opposite. They migrate your environment, migrate the most commonly used tables as an example for SAP, get it up and running in GCP, and then over the next several days, weeks, it'll migrate the rest of the data. So there's different ways that these tool sets work. However, they do significantly decrease the amount of time it will take to get your environment from your on-prem or your currently hosted platform to GCP. And these are really ideal for DMO type of situations as well, because it allows you to quickly migrate your SAP environment over to GCP and then start, as an example, the DMO process for converting to HANA, because now that data is all residing within Google, and the transfer method and time frame can be significantly reduced because your system's in there, you're performing DMO within that hardware platform. You can increase CPU and memory as necessary to make DMO run faster. And then the data transfer is very, very minimal because it is within the same platform on the target and source environment. And a lot of these tools are actually free when you migrate, depending on the platform, but GCP has free tools like Anthos Migrate or Velostrada to help you seamlessly migrate these environments and for no additional cost. So as we talk about data transfer options, that will be the main topic that you're going to discuss and decide as you go through that really planning phase of your migration to GCP. It really depends on how much data you have and how big your database and what your current platform is. So as an example, if you're already a Windows VM platform and you want to just migrate, or a Linux platform VM and you want to migrate, you can use tool sets that migrate it, and you have the luxury of possibly using a tool that maybe seeds it, and then it's okay that it takes 2 weeks to migrate data because it's all online, done in the background, and you're really just making a 30-minute flip of a switch when it's time because it's collecting deltas as an example. Those are the type of scenarios that allow you to migrate a lot faster into GCP. Once you start getting into the bigger databases where maybe you have to do a conversion, such as an Oracle database that you want to convert to HANA, those are the type of migrations that may require true significant bandwidth to migrate your data. So there's options for that. As I mentioned before, you can aggregate multiple VPN tunnels to get your bandwidth up to be able to transfer that data. There's also hardware-based solutions like the transfer appliance service from Google to be able to move your data via an appliance, depending on how large your database is. But either way, Google has a solution for that, and there's a way to make your data migrate as fast as possible and meet timeframes. Okay, Now I'm going to talk about successes and lessons learned from a customer deployment that we recently did into GCP. And the customer is FFF Enterprises. Now they are a leading supplier of basically vaccines and biopharmaceuticals. And their real big challenge was they deployed SAP at the time about 2.5 years prior, and they were experiencing a lot of outages, and they were experiencing a lot of turnaround time when it came to asking for additional resources, and spinning resources up and down were just not feasible for them in their current at the time current private cloud environment. So what we did. So we started with the FFF journey by architecting and designing a game plan for them to migrate based on their needs, based on their hardware requirements, and based on their time frame. Right? We were able to determine that based on their current hardware, they would require additional resources, so we took that into account, and they only had a limited window to migrate their environment. So we analyzed a few different tool sets and chose one that would allow them to migrate within the time frame they required. And that whole migration from start to finish took about 12 weeks, but the actual migrations were significantly shorter. As we went through the environments from dev, took about 8 hours, Q took about 4, and by the time we got to production, we flipped the switch, and about 4 hours later they were running live in GCP and only had about a 2-hour outage window. So now what we did also was build a more robust and stable platform than they had in their private cloud, so they have much better uptime and much better support going forward. So as mentioned here, adopting to the cloud is done in weeks. It's not years. There's a lot of technologies out there that have accelerated the ability for us to move SAP into GCP. Now, there's again, a lot of different ways you can do that. However, depending on your current environment, depending on your business needs, this is where Managecore helps customers figure out their exact needs, their exact time frames, and what additional feature functions they want to get out of the new platform to really start that journey and really plan that out with you. And that's what we did with FFF Enterprises. We sat down, planned it all out, and were able to get them to a stable platform, again, within weeks. So the results from migrating FFF to GCP. First and foremost, we overcame the challenges associated with the downtime, with the resource provisioning, with the ebbs and flows of their business. We were able to overcome those challenges by deploying it in GCP. Now we can spin up servers, we can spin products up and down. As an example, we can take their HANA environment and during peak season, convert it from a 416 gig HANA environment to a 624 gig HANA environment, and then take that back down to 416 gig once we have passed their busy season. So there's a lot of great functionality that we're able to do now to help FFF run their business efficiently. The other thing it did was it freed up the IT team to focus on more innovation. So now going into the next few years, they've already planned other projects with Google. They're focusing on IoT and a few other main accelerators for their business that they couldn't do before because they were experiencing outages and limitations with their current environment and the performance not being able to keep pace with the business needs. And again, that also paved the way for more digital transformation, which they're really focusing on going forward in the next few years. The biggest statistic that occurred when migrating is that it improved SAP performance by 80% while lowering costs. So we were able to get them on a platform, and the GCP platform provided significant cost reduction while significantly increasing performance of their existing environment. Right? We didn't convert them to HANA; they were already HANA. We deployed them in GCP, and they immediately experienced performance gains with like-for-like specs of memory. A few lessons learned, and these are from this project and others. Migration techniques will impact the final landscape. So depending on how you want to migrate will impact where you end up. So as you go through this journey of going into GCP, what you want to take into consideration is how are you going to migrate. On one end, as I mentioned, when you migrate from SAP standard tool sets and you're using export-import methods, generally you're going to end up on a new OS platform, right? So this could be the time to clean up your OS. Maybe your Windows server that you're migrating has a lot of old software on it that you just can't remove. It's a great time to use SAP standard tools to do that functionality. On the flip side, it does take a little longer because you're exporting, transferring data, and then re-importing. Now, if you were to use a cloud tool set, you're pretty much going to land on the same exact OS that you started with in your source environment because you're doing a copy using tool sets. So that tool set is going to take exactly what you have today, and it's going to migrate you over into GCP, and you're going to be left with the same OS, with the same software installed on it. So it does impact where you're going to land, and those are things to take into consideration because your business may want to do other projects such as upgrading the OS as part of this process. If you want to upgrade the OS, you probably don't want to use a cloud migration tool. You probably want to do SAP standard migrations. That way, if you're running an older version, we would migrate you and install you on a new OS as part of this migration. Other lessons learned are system configurations that are required during this transition, right? So let's say you have an environment that has ECC, BobJ, and PI or PO. You have a dev environment, a queue environment, and a prod environment. This entire landscape does not move in one day. So you're generally going to phase it into a dev, a prod, or a queue and a prod, and there could be a few weeks in between. So you want to make sure things like transport paths are working, file shares are working, things like that. Those reconfigurations will have to be done throughout the whole process and mapped out and configured in the source and target environment. So as an example, if I move my dev environment first and your S4 dev environment had your transport path, you're going to have to go back into queue and prod, and you're going to have to reconfigure transport paths to point to the new environment. And then when you move queue, you're going to do the same. And then when you move prod, you're going to do the final config. But you can see how you have to reconfigure the source and target environment as you go through this journey. You also want to take into consideration external integrations, access, load balancing, anything that you need to have access to this environment should be taken into consideration. So with using Fiori, with using other maybe external facing applications, you want to make sure you have the load balancing correct. You want to port any firewall rules, things of that nature. And you want to make sure your user base can access your environment, using SAP GUI or any other type of access methods. Now, often overlooked, if you're thinking of doing your S4 or BW on HANA migration soon, you want to start possibly doing data cleanup because it can save you time and money. Depending on how much data you have, if you have a 10 terabyte database, for example, but you can clean up 4 of those terabytes, that's a significant improvement in cost because you don't have to pay for the larger instance. You don't have to pay for more disk, but you also will get a faster go live should you choose to, have to transfer the data maybe via a homogeneous or heterogeneous system migration. 4 less terabytes to transfer is a lot of hours saved transferring data. So you want to take that into consideration right out of the gate and even before you start your journey. And again, that goes into planning ahead for the data transfer. You want to make sure you have the right bandwidth in place. We're using the right methodology, using a data transfer versus maybe a cloud tool that will seed the data. You just want to plan ahead for that, because if you need more bandwidth, that does take time as well to ask your carrier. And you always want to make sure you test your backup and recovery prior to go live. So as you're deploying this environment, the beauty of GCP is that you can spin up and down sandboxes, you can spin up and down networks. You only pay for what you use for the time you use it. I highly recommend, and we do this with all of our clients as we migrate them, we're going to test a restore in an isolated environment. We're going to test a backup and make sure that whole functionality works, because the first time we are testing it, we don't want it to be during a critical issue. And getting familiar with the environment and getting familiar with the backup strategy and restore strategy in GCP is a good practice. And finally, solution benefits. As I mentioned, 80% cost savings, 7 times performance increase in some of the existing reports. And this, again, is like for like. We didn't increase the amount of memory that FFF had. It was a 12-week migration with production spanning only 4 hours, and most of the systems were up and running in 2. And then again, 24/7/365. Google is a very robust platform, and you get that peace of mind from knowing that your environment is designed and architected right from the get-go to have very high redundancy. And here's a quote from the CIO of FFF Enterprises. He did mention migrating our SAP hosting service with Google Cloud and Managecore has been a game changer. It maximizes the reliability of our IT systems and puts us on a path toward advancing our digital transformation. We're looking to not just utilize innovative technologies from Google, but also to find new ways of advancing our business. And that is something that FFF could not do in their private cloud hosted environment, that we were able to free up the time and adjust the resources and really put them on a platform that allowed them to gain that momentum to start advancing their current platform. Okay, so again, thank you for allowing me to talk about our case study. Now I'll turn it over to Mo to start our Q&A session.
Thanks so much, Nick, and thank you, Eddie. As you mentioned, we're now moving on to our question and answer portion of the webcast. If you have any questions, you can submit them now using the purple Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. If we don't get to your question, please know that the Google Cloud team will follow up with you after the webcast. But I'll get right to it. The first question: how can a managed service solution help optimize my SAP systems running on Google Cloud long term?
Sure, I'll take that one. So a managed service solution really helps optimize it because they are familiar with a particular platform such as GCP, right? They know SAP, they know GCP. As a lot of clients go into a public cloud, they're always wondering, well, what does that mean, right? How do you configure it? How does this work? The nuances between public clouds, they generally don't have that experience or expertise on staff. And a managed service firm such as Managecore has that and can provide it right out of the gate and give you that expertise that you need instead of building it right away in-house. And it gives clients that time to either continue with a managed service firm or build that skill set in-house while they're looking to take their SAP environment into a public cloud.
Thank you. The next question: what other factors should I consider when completing an SAP HANA S4 or BW4 HANA and cloud migration project?
So I covered most of them, but really you want to go through and again, I can't stress enough the data cleansing portion of this. You want to make sure that your system is clean, your system has the least amount of data you require, and you really have some strategy around data retention, because that will save you time and money when you migrate into a platform such as GCP.
Thank you. The next question, in a typical lift and shift migration of SAP to GCP, what is the expected downtime?
So that will vary depending on what type of technology we end up using. But if you're looking at traditional SAP methods, you're looking at data transfer time, so it's highly dependent on your database size, but generally that would be a weekend. So a few days, you start on a Friday evening, you're done on Sunday. But if you use cloud tool sets, such as Anthos Migrate or something like that from GCP, what that allows you to do is migrate right away and have your environment probably migrated within a few hours. So only a few hour downtime. And then it because it's already synced, or it will then sync as the day or weeks go by, but you'll only have probably a 2-hour window where it would be down.
Thank you. It looks like we have a little time for a couple more. The next one, what would you recommend, to move the SAP workload as is first to GCP and then re-architect the application in GCP, or re-architect first and then move to GCP?
Yeah, so good question. It would depend. My answer would say it would depend on what state your environment is in, right? If we're re-architecting, and it does take some time. If you're doing HA or DR, it could take a little more time, because at that point, you're really trying to basically reinstall SAP as an HA solution, which is a reinstall. So with that being said, if your ultimate goal is how fast can we move to save costs, or we have limitations on how long our current contract with our current vendor is, I would say you re-architect afterwards. However, if you have the time, I'd say it's always best to re-architect and deploy in GCP your final architecture right out of the gate.
Thank you. Well, let's do one more question and then we'll close the webcast today. Do you have any benchmarks to retrieve backup data from Google storage versus persistent disks?
So I don't particularly have any benchmarks for that. I will say that we've run tests, and if you're doing traditional persistent disk, then to cloud storage and then back, we've seen backups like that take. Our one client we saw backups take roughly 4 hours. With back ends going right to cloud storage, we were able to cut that down to 30 minutes. Because you don't have to do the 2 hops, and you can run parallel threads with backend to make that much faster.
Thank you so much, Nick. Thank you, Eddie. I'll hand it back to the both of you for any closing remarks before we close the webcast today.
No, thank you so much, and really appreciate everybody's engagement today, and the questions are great. There are a number of other questions that were really interesting as well. We'll try to get those out if there's a way, but feel free to reach out to us. And Nick, thank you so much for such a great job and a great presentation. The expertise that you demonstrate and the success that you've had is very, very indicative of what you've just discussed. And I welcome everybody to please engage with us, and we look forward to all your future partnerships. And thank you again for the time.
Thank you, Eddie, and thank you everyone else on the call, and feel free to reach out if anyone has any additional questions.
Thank you so much, Eddie and Nick, for a great webcast. On behalf of ASUG, I'd like to thank Google Cloud and Managecore, as well as everyone who took the time today to attend this webcast. If we didn't get to answer your question, the Google Cloud team will follow up with you after the webcast concludes, or if you have additional questions, you can contact our speakers directly by clicking on the speaker engagement tool on your screen. Before we go, though, I'd like to leave you with some quick information on ASUG for anyone unfamiliar with our user group. ASUG helps connect SAP customers to the people and information that they need to maximize their investment in SAP. If you'd like to speak to someone about becoming a member of ASUG, please message info@asug.com. As mentioned before, the recording and slides from today's program will be posted to the ASUG website, and all registrants will receive a follow-up email. Please take a moment to complete the survey on the right of your console or by clicking on the green survey engagement tool at the bottom of your screen. With that, I'd like to close today's webcast. Have a wonderful day, everyone.